Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a really fascinating journey into a concept that might completely change how you view your favorite books, movies, and honestly, even the world around you. We're exploring the core thesis that science fiction isn't just escapist entertainment. Rather, it's the modern mythology, the underlying narrative architecture that is actually shaping our entire society. Okay, let's dive into this. What if science fiction is actually the secret mythology of our 21st century reality? That question really sets the stakes for our entire analysis today. We're going to decode exactly how the stories we consume are actually coding the reality we live in. And to do that, we're looking at the extensive work of a man who has essentially made this his life study. Section 1. The Modern Mythmaker, Decoding Damien Walter. So, Walter is a British writer, a former columnist for The Guardian and the BBC, and a self-described former Special Forces librarian. He's got a pretty eclectic background, right? He ran literacy projects in low-income UK cities before leaving for Asia to become a digital nomad based out of Bali. And just to put his influence into perspective, his online course, The Rhetoric of Story, has been followed by over 30,000 students worldwide. He's managed to brilliantly bridge the gap between highly academic literary theory and everyday fan culture, pulling in millions of views by analyzing the philosophical depths of everything from Star Trek to William Gibson. But with a massive platform comes massive friction. When you combine Walter's very specific background, a former Special Forces librarian who worked for British state media, who's now living as a digital nomad in Bali, the internet trolls tend to weave their own wild mythology. They literally argue that he is a covert MI6 operative. It's this combative, frankly hilarious exchange that sparked over a simple copyright warning, but it absolutely proves his core thesis. Human beings will instantly make up stories and myths to explain the world around them. Moving on to Section 2, Logos versus the Mythos, the Framework. Walter draws heavily on ancient Greek concepts to analyze sci-fi, and this brilliantly illustrates how we process the world. On one side, we have logos. That's logic, science, reason, economics. On the other side is mythos, story, meaning, identity, and values. Walter argues that modern society has become hyper-focused on logos. We are just obsessed with the data, the tech, the literal facts, but we have completely lost touch with our mythos. We've kind of forgotten that identity and meaning are actually formed through the shared sacred experience of storytelling. And this brings us to mythopoeia. It's a term originally coined by J.R.R. Tolkien, and it means the conscious creation of a new mythology. Walter views popular sci-fi through this exact lens, because every culture repurposes old myths for its own times, right? For instance, he points out that Star Wars is really just the classic hero's journey set in a galaxy far, far away. In Star Trek, that is essentially the myth of Jason and the Argonauts in space. Science fiction is simply how our technologically advanced society does its myth-making. But here's the thing, this mythos is not static. It constantly evolves. It starts back in 1818 with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which establishes the core tension between science and humanism. Then by the 1940s, the golden age of sci-fi brought a very positive, utopian outlook on what science could achieve. Fast forward to the 1980s, though, and the cyberpunk genre flips the script entirely, preaching that unchecked corporate power in science will create a nightmare future. So the genre constantly flip-flops between our highest utopian hopes and our deepest dystopian anxieties. Section 3. Decoding Dark Dystopian Futures, Cyberpunk to Singularity. So why does modern science fiction heavily trend toward the darker stuff these days? According to Walter, it reflects our modern, real-world anxieties about technology. Take the concept of the technological singularity. It starts when the creation of technology creates a positive feedback loop. The more tech you have, the faster you can create more. This triggers an exponential growth curve, meeting straight up to what Walter humorously calls the rapture of the nerds. It's this terrifying, highly disruptive moment where runaway AI basically takes over. It's a concept beloved by venture capitalists, but deeply unsettling for the rest of society who just fear being made obsolete. But perhaps even scarier than a sudden AI takeover is what Walter describes with this quote, "The end of the world not with a bang, but with a jackpot." This frames the slow, grinding apocalypse that we see in seminal works like William Gibson's Neuromancer and Alfonso Cuarón's film Children of Men. It's not a sudden, fiery explosion from the sky. It's a slow decay managed by elites. In Children of Men, we see this slow apocalypse perfectly rendered. The film depicts a society completely without children for 18 years. And to keep the miserable, atomized population distracted from the looting of their own economy, the state relies on brutalist cultural monuments, like a fortress like Tate Modern, and relentless anti-immigrant scapegoating. It serves as a dark mirror to various political narratives we see operating in the real world today. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Propaganda in pop culture, the three-body problem. Because if science fiction is our modern mythos, it can absolutely be weaponized. Walter argues that sci-fi is actively used today as a tool for political propaganda. Take Cixin Liu's massive hit novel, The Three-Body Problem. Walter analyzes elements of this text, specifically the alien Trisolarans, as a highly symbolic appeal to Chinese nationalist power structures. The Trisolarans represent a force of absolute, emotionless order attempting to conquer chaos. Walter suggests this is a deliberate narrative alignment with authoritarian desires for total societal control at the expense of liberal chaos. And this authoritarian sci-fi vision is bleeding right into reality through what Walter calls gamified realities. First, we see the imposition of authoritarian order. Second, the use of AI to regulate and monitor work output in ways humans can't even fully comprehend. And third, the ultimate real-world manifestation, the social credit system. These are classic science fiction concepts that are functioning today as actual control mechanisms, which ultimately stifle the true innovation that comes from freedom. Finally, Section 5, Curing the Meaning Crisis, Integral Storytelling.
So the crucial point is, how do we fix this broken narrative? Well, in discussions with medical voices like ZDoggMD, Walter explores the psychological impacts of these broken stories, what cognitive scientists refer to as the meaning crisis. We're caught between atomization, where individuals seek pure autonomy but end up completely isolated, and communion, the sense of togetherness rooted in a shared cultural story. Walter contrasts his life in the UK, which he views as deeply atomized and lacking a shared narrative, with his life in Bali, where a strong shared religious mythos holds the society together and gives people an anchoring sense of meaning.
This perspective stems directly from Walter's early background in social work. He found that when encountering people who are struggling in life, it was usually because, on some level, their story was broken. Psychological struggles, depression, and the broader meaning crisis occur when an individual's personal story just no longer fits into the broader mythology of their world. We are quite literally sick because our stories are broken. Furthermore, Walter believes we are actually exacerbating this confusion in our education systems. He argues, we're trying to promote people to this level far too quickly in their development. By teaching intense postmodernism and fluid identity concepts to young people before they've even formed a solid ego or basic identity, we throw them into deep psychological confusion. And the result? A hyper-focus on fragmented identity politics rather than a unifying narrative. But there is hope. Walter's optimistic solution lies in Ken Wilber's integral theory. This is a framework that synthesizes pre-modern wisdom, modern scientific logic, and postmodern understanding. Walter uses this absolutely stunning historical example to explain it. Scientists found a 15,000-year-old frozen iceman covered in tattoos that perfectly mapped onto acupuncture pressure points. True integral thinking and the future of science fiction lies in merging that deep, ancient, pre-modern wisdom with our futuristic, spacefaring technology in order to heal our broken stories. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, going all the way back to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Science can rebuild you, but should it? Just because we have the technology to reshape our bodies, our societies, and our stories, it doesn't mean we automatically have the wisdom to do it right. As you navigate the real world and the stories you consume within it, ask yourself, what kind of mythos is shaping your reality? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the narrative.